Hello and welcome to Rotted Reviews, and welcome to this special episode of Rotted Recommendations. This is a series in which I am going to be taking the suggestions of my patrons in terms of what sub-genre of horror movies would you like me to make a listing of and a recommendation of. So if you want to watch the top 5 vacuum cleaner kills, go ahead and list it within our chat on our Discord. So I assembled those, and I am going to be picking from them and making these videos. And our first pick comes to us from patron Mel, who asked, what's the most soul-crushing movie I would recommend? And I like that. I chose this one because of that wording more than anything else. All too often we get creators that are coming up with videos about their most disturbing movies, which is not without its merit, and I'm certain that I will do that at some point in my career. But this is a little bit different. This is more nuanced. This is less visceral and more personal. This doesn't necessarily include the heavy hitters of the most disturbing lists, like the Serbian film, Human Centipede, so on and so forth. This is a little bit more right in the heart. And I want to make sure that that's clear, that that's how I interpreted it, because this is going to be a very personal list for me. This is literally the list of movies that affected me for days or weeks after, which in a lot of cases doesn't necessarily come down to how much shit or gore was on the screen, but how much it pierced my heart. And in doing so, that means that it might not resonate the same for everybody. This is simply how they affected me in my life at the time that I watched them. So, before we get into the list, I'm just going to go ahead and really quickly go through some runners-up here. In other words, I couldn't make up my mind, so I kind of shelved these off, but I didn't want to just leave them out entirely. And so the honorable mentions go to The Girl Next Door, Happiness, fuck that movie, and River of Fundament. Now, I'm actually kind of cheating with River of Fundament a bit. It's one of those that I actually haven't seen, but I desperately want to. And it's a situation where as soon as I found out the nature of what it was about, I didn't want to watch it. And then I found out that I couldn't. And I've never wanted to watch a movie more ever since. There's a certain level of masochism involved with a lot of the movie watches that I put myself through. And between the deprivation of availability of this film and that masochistic itch, it's one that I would love to watch and sit through for the 5.5-hour runtime that it has, just to say that I could. And I have a feeling if I do, it would make this list just by sheer obstinance of the runtime and the material. I have a feeling there's no way it couldn't affect me. Anyway, runners up, off the table. Let's get into the list proper. Number 1 on the list, and these are not in any kind of order. There's no preference or level of disturbing or anything along those lines. These are just a list of 5. And the number 1 selection is the 2000 movie Requiem for a Dream. Directed by Darren Aronofsky, this movie tackles addiction in many different forms, revolving around the lives of 4 principal characters. For me, this movie was a gut punch in so many different ways, but not the least of which was how much it let me attach myself to the characters before sending them spiraling in their own little hell. Not to mention, there's always the thing in play of snap out of it. There's not a whole lot of external elements stacked up against them. You could tell that if they wanted to seek treatment, if they wanted to accept their demons and face them, that they could, and you just wanted to shake them off the screen and get them the help that they need. But it was just a lost cause. And it was an interesting thing because it crushed my soul, as the title of this video describes. But I think that it did for everybody else that was in the theater as well. I watched this at the Landmark Theater in Hillcrest in San Diego, and it was one of the more bizarre situations I've ever experienced in the theater. When the movie finished, when end credits roll, there's typically a response. There's the people that will all get up and walk out of the theater and talk amongst themselves. What did you think of that? What about that scene? So on and so forth. Oh my God, can you believe they did that? Or there's the people that just simply quietly stay through the end credits. And what I saw was kind of a weird mix of both. It was everybody just numb, sitting in their seats. And then one by one, everybody just kind of got up. Nobody waited for the credits to finish. It was just everybody taking that moment to just, what the fuck? And silently getting up and walking out without a word. It was a really interesting kind of reaction to see, and that's exactly how I felt. It felt empty inside, but in the best way possible. I witnessed something that was truly art, and I just want to give a shout out, since I'm talking about this movie, to Ellen Burstyn's performance in particular. The scene in which she is talking about, why does she make the bed? Why does she do this and that?
I'm lonely. I'm old.
You got friends, Ma?
It's not the same.
And that breaking voice as she's talking to her son was just, it brought me to tears easily. And the rest of the movie fared no better. And in the number 2 spot, the 2001 movie directed by Michael Cuesta, LIE, not lie, but the acronym for Long Island Expressway. Starring Paul Dano as Howie as the young teenager that is susceptible to outside influences as his life is being torn asunder. Howie lives a fairly comfortable life in some affluent areas of the suburbs, but his life is actually kind of starting to unravel as the external world around him, his family and so on and so forth, are embroiled in legal battles and being torn apart there. Just at the time where he is questioning a lot of things about himself, as a lot of teenagers do, he's finding himself in a very vulnerable position, deciding where he wants to go in life, so on and so forth. Enter Big John Harrigan, played by Brian Cox, who plays a very paternal, very caring role as somebody that, in this tumultuous life of Howie, provides a stable resource for him. All the while, he is grooming Howie. This was a difficult movie, not only in how realistic the grooming aspects of this were, but also in the positive nature that the film portrayed Brian Cox's Big John character. It didn't make him a saint, far from it. This film was very upfront about who this person was and what he was after by providing that one stable resource that Howie needed in his life, this role model just when the moment came that he was on the razor's edge and needed somebody to latch onto. There was Big John, cooking him breakfast, caring for him, and introducing him to one of the most creepy shaving sequences ever in a movie. Number 3, the 1998 Gaspar Noé film, I Stand Alone. This is the story of a nameless butcher character who's simply trying to survive. He's made some bad choices, and he's living in the context of a cold society and the consequences of those choices. This was a soul-crushing movie for me in a number of ways. Number 1, it was the first Gaspar Noé film that I had watched, and I really didn't exactly know what I was in for. Number 2, the despair and the bleakness that is imbued within every single frame of this film is offset only by the absolute awful take on the nature of humanity. And number 3, holy shit, the ending. I won't spoil anything, but it was a tough watch. Number 4, Lars von Trier. All of them. I honestly, this is one where I kept wanting to, okay, well, what about Dancer in the Dark? What about Antichrist? What about Dogville? What about Manderley? And it's like, well, shit. You know what? Fuck it. Lars von Trier, all of them. I honestly, it seems to be kind of his specialty is to make movies that crush your soul. And that's not to everybody's liking. He's an extremely divisive director and an even more divisive human being. But there does seem to be a central theme in which I finish watching one of his movies and I just kind of walk around in a stupor for days afterward, just kind of wondering what the meaning of it all is. Why bother with anything? It's a tough thing to get through, and I honestly have started making plans. If I'm going to be kicking on a Lars von Trier movie, I kind of make sure that I have some backup feel-good stuff waiting in the wings. That's where I'll queue up the Goonies and shit to just be a palate cleanser and remind myself how whimsical and fun the world can actually be. Because, damn it, he just strips that away. And the number 5 movie, and I know I'm going to get some flack for this, but I just couldn't not include it. This is one of those things where I'm glad that the phrasing of this was done how it was, because it's much more personal than visceral. And personally, I can't not choose the Maggie May segment of the 2020 ETHERIA Film Festival Shorts Showcase. Directed by 𝗘𝗾𝗂𝗶𝗽𝗺𝗀 Russell, I'm only going to softly touch on why this really affected me the way that it did. I've talked about it in some patron vlogs at greater length than I'm really comfortable making public here, but for me, this was a tough one because it resonated so much in my life. This is the story of two sisters that are temporarily living with one another. After a funeral happens, everybody kind of trickles out, and one of them is kind of making sure that everything is in order. And then we have the other sister of Maggie May. And a series of events start trickling out that result in absolute tragedy, and all of this tragedy that could be fixed with a simple phone call is instead met with just complete apathy. No matter how much anybody screams, shouts, or begs for help, Maggie May just doesn't want to be bothered, doesn't want to get out of her chair, doesn't want to make a phone call, doesn't want to lift a finger, and doesn't want to try anything. And at the end, when natural events have taken their course and she is presented with the consequences of her inaction, the one thing that she says is,
I didn't do anything!
The reason that this resonated with me is my family lives across the country, and my father passed away a few years ago, and there's a strained relationship aspect to our family dynamic, but even so, the circumstances in which my father passed was the result of the cumulative properties of inaction. And the resultant attitude that I have been on the receiving end of from family members that fell under the responsible care umbrella treated it very much in the same I didn't do nothing attitude. So to watch that on screen really was difficult. I wasn't expecting to watch what I did, and I watched the ETHERIA Film Festival Short Showcase on Shudder. I was expecting to watch it and make a video review of it, and after watching that, I did watch the entire film all the way through. I loved it. I recommend it. This is my opportunity to say that. I didn't get to before because of that fucking short film, which I loved. I did love it. It was brilliant. It was great. It was well done. It was difficult. It was disturbing. But I was going to watch and review it, and based on that short, which was the second short, if I'm recalling correctly, the second short in the film, I couldn't do it. I had to kind of recognize my inability to remain objective and neutral and approach it on a even platform front. And recognizing that, I had to bow out. It's one of the rare moments in which I recognize that this is too personal for me. I'm not going to be able to speak neutral words about it and review it without any kind of bias. So yeah, so this is one that was very personal to me. I cannot guarantee that you're going to view it the same way. In fact, I almost guarantee that you won't. But taking in the context of what I would recommend, I do recommend the entirety of the ETHERIA Film Festival Short Showcase. If you can still find it, I'm not sure if it's still available on Shudder, but if you can watch it, I do recommend giving it a go. I liked it. It was good. And Maggie May broke my heart. And so that should about do it. Thank you again to patron Mel for recommending this subcategory that I was able to expand on and provide my list for. Take care of yourselves, everybody. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.